Thank you. Good afternoon.
Welcome to this panel. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and moderate a panel on sustainable development goals and public-private partnerships. I'm honored to have an excellent panel here with 3 panelists. The first panelist is Karin Granda, Executive Director of Peru's agency to promote private investment, which is called PROINVERSIÓN. The second panelist is Geraldo Luiz Farias. He is an assessor to the government of Paraná and will report on Paraná's experience in PPPs and in sustainable development goals. And the third panelist is Francesca Castellani. Francesca is the Chief of Unit for Strategy and Monitoring in the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington. The panel today will look at how PPPs can help to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a very important topic because huge resources and investments are needed to achieve sustainable development and the implementation of the SDGs. So today we are going to hear experiences on how this is done in different countries. The first speaker is Karin Granda. Karin has a very interesting educational background. She has a master in economics and also a master in business law with a specialty in business regulation. Karin has worked on structuring and development of mechanisms to promote private investment in public-private partnerships. She has also worked on the design of a regulatory framework to promote public-private partnerships. And she has been a director of private investment policy in the Ministry of Economy and Finance in Peru. Now she is a special projects director of PROINVERSIÓN, and she also teaches at the School of Public Management of the Universidad del Pacífico. So Karin, the floor is yours.
Gracias. Agradezco la oportunidad para...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for allowing me to talk about the efforts of Peru towards the SDGs. In Peru, the infrastructure is important in order to achieve our SDGs, although we are focused on the SDG 9, focused on resilient, and we're also focused on water, sanitation, energy. We're talking about infrastructure, not only in the SDGs, but they are part of other SDGs connected to education and sanitation. Although in Peru, there are documents focused on SDGs, the efforts are isolated in infrastructure by and large. Nonetheless, I would like to highlight that through PPPs mechanism, we have carried out a specific contributions in each project in order to achieve the SDGs. We are going to start with some very specific example. SDG 4, we know, is to guarantee that everybody has the right to quality education and learning opportunities. Now, for this, what do we need? We need infrastructure, we need classrooms, we need educational furniture. Not only the schools also need other type of infrastructure services to provide learning opportunities, like power for heating in the Andes region, lighting, and access to water that, although it seems something basic in my country, there are still gaps. Sanitary installation, this is a need to prevent COVID, and what is even more important, we have to have access to digital access, internet, computer, laptops. In PROINVERSIÓN, as the agency in charge of fostering investment, with private initiative, like PPP. We're structuring PPP projects that incorporate packages of 47 schools with a total of investment that is around $600 million. We have two types of schools. We have schools at risk in poverty zones. In Lima, we have around 41 schools. We're talking about rebuilding schools that present a high risk of collapse, and they put at risk the life and the integrity of teachers and students, and they need total restructuring. And we have high yield schools like Cusco, Pasco, Huancavelica that have a characteristic to incorporate, in addition to education, to incorporate housing. Now, the development of the projects are connected directly to SDG 4 because through infrastructure, we want to improve the quality of education. There are other SDGs, like for schools of high yield or high performance in the center of the country, we have developed risk studies due to floods or due to landslides, where these schools are connected as they're in rainy areas close to rivers, where sometimes these are dry rivers that haven't received water for years. Nonetheless, we still develop these type of studies. Because of this, we have created mitigation rules. We are seeing the land. We see also rain that don't exist in this area. Therefore, the infrastructure has to be protected if we have an extreme climate event. We're talking about resilient infrastructure. Now, these schools, through PPP, incorporate coefficiency studies for the first time in a public school. We are incorporating coefficient studies so that renewable energy facilities like photovoltaic panels that contribute energy for the project, minimum energy for this project. These are the first public schools that are adopting these type of measures. This is not a state policies. These are specific efforts that we're carrying out in each one of the PPP projects. This is one side. I would also like to comment about the SDG 6, connected to another fundamental element, water and sanitation for everybody. The National Infrastructure Plan in Peru calculated that there is an investment gap of basic access to infrastructure and the infrastructure of quality of water and sanitation of $80 billion. Out of more or less one part of this correspond to investments that have to be carried out in the short term, in the upcoming 5 years. Now, hand in hand, the SDGs of the 2030, the SDG 2030 want to reduce to have the percentage of wastewater without treatment. And for this in Peru, the Ministry of Housing and Sanitation is strongly betting on the mechanisms of the PPPs. In Lima, for instance, there are over 800,000 inhabitants of the poorest districts that do not have drinkable water. Now, the supply that they receive are through trucks, water trucks, and they have to pay approximately 6 times the price than a person that receives the service through proper infrastructure. The offering in Lima seems sufficient to close this gap. This is why we are strongly working with the Ministry of Housing on here we have the obras de cabecera in order to bring water from the Atlantic basins to the Pacific basin to service the population that doesn't have access to water. In average, we have 1.5 million beneficiaries in Lima. Now, if we analyze this in a global fashion, this is part of the Serapal agency, that is a water agency in Peru that has used these resilient infrastructure principles. And now we go to the ODS 9 to make decisions in order to develop the investment plans that allows that the water goes to Lima. What have they developed? In an analysis of 300 scenarios in the future, we've identified investments and there are 600 million in investment that could be not used because they didn't contribute towards water safety. And one of the projects that, yes, contributes, that is that here we have basic infrastructure. This incorporates mechanisms of retribution for ecosystem, and here we can give back to the basins through agreements with communities and communities so that they can finance activities geared toward conservation, recovery, and the sustainable use of the ecosystems that provide water resources. On the other side, one of the objectives is to reduce the percentage or increase the percentage of wastewater that are captured. And here we also have a portfolio of 9 projects of treatment plants in different regions of the country. In total, they are $600 million. And here it is important to highlight that during the Peruvian state has focused on projects of water supply. But nonetheless, the wastewater treatment is in the hands of public companies that provide these services. In a study of the regulating agency of sanitation in Peru, we observed that these treatment plants, the current ones that were carried out through public works or direct administration, they do not meet the service levels. This means that the treatment that they carry out don't meet the minimum environmental standards. This is why the PPP mechanisms, when you see sustainability and regarding best standards, this is a way to be able to achieve the ODS 6. SDG 6, briefly, another SDG directly connected to infrastructure that would be resilient infrastructure. As part of the pre-investment studies in the early stages of the development of the projects, we have a risk analysis since the first stages. Nonetheless, not all the studies are at the same level. In Peru, not all the studies are at the same level. When we develop these projects via PPP, we have a greater view of the risk. One is how we focus on this objective. We have a wastewater treatment plant in the Amazon, in Puerto Maldonado. We've done a pilot assessment of the climate risk that would affect the different components of the wastewater plant in order to establish a methodology and apply this in the project to approach these risks, include them as well in the reports. And in addition, what we have also done is to optimize the original technological solution, including cogeneration of energy, in order to drop costs and also in order to drop the greenhouse gas effect emission and to create resilient infrastructure. Now connected to the SDG in order to achieve sustainable cities. Now, up to 2030, the target of Peru is to have access to safe transportation systems. And in Lima, we face a major problem. There is an absence of massive transportation, and we have lots of bottlenecks in our traffic. One of the major projects is called the Outskirt Ring Road. And this is the construction of a highway of 34 kilometers that will connect 11 districts of Lima and the region of Callao that will allow to have access to national highways. Now, in the framework of this SDG, what do? We contribute with new entry access and exit access to one of the poorest areas in Lima. And here we have over 1 million inhabitants, and it has one only exit toward the other district. We want to have additional exits and it's the first time in Peru that we have structured an intelligent highway that incorporates the most advanced technologies in design, operation, and inspection in real time. Another important element is that in addition to of improving the quality of life of people, when we reduce the circulation time by 50%, we import the quality of life of 1,800 families through new sustainable housing programs. In summary, the efforts that we have been developing in order to contribute with the SDGs, well, we have to be honest, they are still isolated. There is no strong investment plan. Nonetheless, before each program, from the early stages, the formulation, the program structure, and we have been working with the different ministries to incorporate all the elements that can contribute to meet the SDGs of 2030. There's still a lot to do. Thank you very much.
Very much, Karin. A very interesting presentation on the work you do in Peru, which is quite ranging from covering a lot of sectors, ranging from education to water and sanitation, transport, and also sustainable housing. Thank you for that introduction. The next speaker is Geraldo Luiz Farias. Prazer te ver de novo, Geraldo.
It's a pleasure to see you again, Geraldo.
Present the work of Paranacidade on public-private partnerships and the SDGs. Please, Geraldo.
Obrigado, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to start by thanking the IDB group for organizing this event, and especially this panel about the Sustainable Development Goals, and also the European Union invitation to make this presentation representing the state of Paraná, the strategy of Paraná, and the sustainable objectives. And also our strategy project, which is financed by the European Union in order to extend this offer to all the municipalities of Paraná, this offer of methodologies and tools to integrate all the sustainable development goals and municipal management by creating a local governance and also aligning the municipal management to the sustainable development goals, and also the training of the public management. Here in this path of the state of Paraná and starting working with SDGs and public policies, we started doing that in 2016. At the time, our governor, Carlos Jr., was the Secretary of State for Public Works and Urban Development, and also he was the Superintendent of Paranacidade. These are the institutions in our state responsible for planning, execution, coordination, and monitoring of public policies and all activities related to urban development, promoting the use of needed instruments to turn our cities into sustainable, inclusive, and equal cities in order to ensure the well-being of its population. These actions developed with the Socio-Economic Development Council, which is the agency that supports strategically the state governor, and its purpose is to promote the municipalization of the SDGs in the state of Paraná. And to implement the SDGs, we then created our strategy, which was called the Paraná Keeping an Eye on the SDGs. We looked for partnerships and we worked on them. And so this Council worked with us. We also worked with the Information Council of the State, the Planning Secretariat, the Paraná Institute for Social and Economic Development, the Court of Accounts of the State, in addition of CEDU and Paranacidade, which I already mentioned. Always supported, even in our first steps, by WFO. So this group started developing the local dimension of the 2030 agenda and each SDGs, showing the connections between the implementation of the SDGs locally and the impact in people's quality of life. Since the starting of this implementation, we had practical actions such as a report that provides in real time the SDGs indicators for all cities in the state. This is also a state strategy in the state with planning tools and the financing of infrastructure works and actions to local administrations, among all other results. Out of these pioneer results, we were able to send them to other players, and this is a subnational administration in the state of Paraná. And our aim is to transform the SDGs into real actions. Therefore, we were able to get an award of sustainable partnerships from Switzerland because we had that will of implementing the SDGs. At the time, we had 247 towns included. Now we have 341, and we have a formal agreement with the state to promote and connect SDGs to our public policies. This also allowed the Economic and Development Organization, OECD, to invite the state of Paraná to be the first Brazilian state to participate with other 9 pilot regions in the world of a study in a territorial approach in terms of the results for the SDGs. The result of this study was published in June of this year, and you can check it on the internet, and it has indicated the state of Paraná as an example of sustainable development. Now, moving forward with our partnerships, and we know that we'll be working together and keeping the same objectives, we know that we are strengthening that assumption that we are not going to leave anyone behind. Thus, and to accelerate implementation of 2030 agenda in the state of Paraná, specifically in our towns, in our cities, the Paraná's administration signed in September of this year a cooperation agreement with 5 other players that integrate themselves to the strengthening project for the SDG strategy financed by the European Union. The project gathers a coalition of organizations that are represented by local governments, private sector, the civil society, and academia. And the purpose is to qualify the debate regarding the SDGs in Brazil, and more than that, to improve the implementation paths for this global agenda. These 5 players basically are the State Council for Socio-Economic Development, which is the agency responsible for the implementation of this agenda in the state of Paraná, the State Secretary for Urban Development and Public Works, and the Cooperation Agency, Paranacidade, with activities related to urban development and institutional development of the Paranaense towns. The National Mayor's Front, this is part of the strengthening strategy here, and this is also financed by the European Union. And the objective is to connect the cities and to contribute to social and sustainable growth. And we have a 4th element the program called Sustainable Cities, and the objective here is to move and to commit societies and local societies and governments to this project, and the Association of Cities of Paraná, which has a private approach, and they involve the municipal activities in the state. Among the objectives of this cooperation, we have support and help jointly the cities and the state in the implementation of the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. Also technically contribute with the localization of the SDGs in the 389 municipalities in the state, strengthening local public policies. Also improving municipal indicators, and also partnerships and national and international funding. Also articulation of partnerships among the different areas and the government, companies, and civil society and universities, aiming to meet all the objectives of this cooperation agreement, and also to be able to share the best practices of this work. This the work of this agreement has already started. In the past few days, we have been working with the sensitization stage. In some towns, we have already done it, in 4 cities actually, and we reached 36% of public managers of the cities in the states. That is 144 cities already started with the sensitization process, and also bringing in the 2030 agenda to their public policies, and more the use of platforms that these institutions, the cidades and Paranacidades, that they have to support planning and financing of actions that are related to SDGs. After that, the other 15 associations in different cities will be visited, and we will start trainings in the platforms of these institutions that are involved in the process. The connection with the PPPs might not be very specific in this initial explanation, but what we aim to show you has to do with what Governor Carlos Roberto Martins Jr. has mentioned when he was in high-level Pollution 4 in 2019 in New York. That is, we are here because of the partnership between the national and subnational agencies, the partnership with local associations, the partnership and commitment that we have already signed with state governors, and the PPPs that we have driven in our state with the creation of tools that provide transparency and security to implement this joint work. We are expanding these conversations right now, the conversations for these partnerships, whether with local or national support, getting more and more close to the private sector, the civil society, academia, and also increasing the international relationships, and also supporting the local governments in promoting infrastructure for the logistics of their own products and the main product, which is human capital, which makes this production happen. So we value people, and we value their space and their needs, and the city that is will be contributing to everyone's happiness. Thank you very much.
Geraldo, for this introduction to Parana's state policy on SDG implementation. I found that quite impressive, actually, when I was at the launch event for that strategy. In September, the launch event, you mentioned that Paraná is really taking the SDG framework and looks at how to operationalize this. Because often the SDGs and the Agenda 2030 seem to be quite high level and not very directly related to the work of urban planners and managers. But Paraná has taken on the task to operationalize this and bring it down to the city and municipal level. And also seek the benefits of that for urban planning, basically with a focus on partnerships, with a focus on innovation, and with a focus also on mobilization of resources and linking all that to the SDGs with a quite sophisticated indicator system. So I thought that was a very, very interesting experience. Thank you for sharing this, Geraldo. The third speaker in our panel is Francesca Castellani, Chief of Strategy and Monitoring Division in the IDB. Francesca has a long experience in the bank. She has been a principal economist and senior advisor in the office of the vice president. And she also worked in other international organizations, in the OECD and in the World Bank and UNCTAD. Francesca, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Good morning to all. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you. I would like to talk about how we've identified the developing challenges in different countries and the role PPPs can play in actually fostering their development. It's very interesting. We have a goal, 17.7, that focuses particularly in promoting partnerships and PPPs. And there are other also focus on PPPs, as we heard from Karin in Methanol.1, for instance, focusing on quality infrastructures. As for the group, well, we have in the PPPs a very important part of the bank's DNA, the group's DNA, and our institutional strategy. And it's very clear to all of us that the SDGs have, well, a very important ambition, bringing also private investments to the process, and PPPs can greatly contribute to improve access to financing, to mobilize resources, and to have better services provided more efficiently, among other benefits. So what do we do at the bank level when considering the challenges that comprise, well, the development of different countries? We need to have an integrated approach. It is a gap-based approach, and it's directly related to the SDGs gaps. And we have a unique relationship between the bank and different organizations when it comes to PPPs, and we can finance projects more effectively. We begin by making a diagnosis, by identifying those gaps that I just mentioned in relation to the SDGs indicators, and this diagnosis is supported by an analysis, an in-depth analysis on the PPP status in different countries. We have a team of regional coordinators that also support us in identifying the opportunities for synergy and for PPPs. And it's also important. And sorry, the sound is no longer coming into the booth. And now the sound is back. And in some countries, we focus precisely on the SDGs gaps. And earlier this year, we approved a strategy according to which the government of Uruguay, actually pointed out this would be an important gap that should be addressed. And yes, the bank seeks to contribute to addressing those SDGs gaps. And the bank is also, of course, focusing on PPPs in regards to SDG 4 on quality education. Last year, BidInvest also developed a loan to support PPP to enhance the education structure and infrastructure in the country. Previously to that, the bank had also supported the management capacity of the PPPs in that country, and focusing also on education. Now, I would like to give you a brief overview on how we brought together the activities of the bank, the projects we carry out, and the SDGs. It's important to bear in mind the bank provides quality and reliable information on our support to the SDGs, because the SDGs, of course, have their goals in a common language that is broadly used from the public sector and also the private sector. Investors who are willing to finance projects and, of course, want to close these gaps. And we can also support these projects with a methodology. And I would like to give you an example. The methodology, whenever we design a project, the bank sets forth indicators and results that guide us in the intervention process. So let us suppose that we are going to work on a hospital's project. And in designing the project, we will set the goals. Among the goals, we will, for instance, seek to reduce maternal mortality. This is related to, of course, SDG 3, so, health and well-being. And by identifying the results for every indicator through which we will monitor the project, we will be able to assess if the goals are being achieved. I mean, that does not mean to say that all the bank's projects tie the results to the SDG indicators. In some cases, the needs are more specific. However, whenever designing a project and identifying the result matrix and indicators, we need to have a clear relation between the indicator and the objective. And the last example before closing, the bank last year supported many projects in the health system to, of course, support the COVID emergency. And many of the indicators were related to the vaccination indicators, to the number of deaths that were caused by COVID. We know that these particular indicators are not comprised in the ultimate result. Still, these projects and these indicators also support SDG 3.3 regarding eradication of diseases, communicable diseases. So we do have a methodology that is based on indicators and results. And these are the criteria that are used in order to classify the interventions of the bank and the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francesca, for that overview of the bank's work on SDGs and how to integrate SDGs into the planning process and also implementation and reporting process. We only have 2.5 minutes left, so I would like to give each panelist the floor just for a 30-second or 1-minute statement with a final message you would like to convey, ideally linked to the potential of public and private partnerships in implementing the SDGs. So how do you see the potential in your country, or in the case of Francesca, for the IDB? Thank you. Starting with Karin, please.
Thank you. I believe that there's a lot to do because COVID has strongly impacted us and has created budget restrictions, and we need mechanisms in order to capitalize or to attract private investment, to bring new capitals, and we can do this through the PPPs in order to close the infrastructure gap. We have a lot to do because we have to create the national infrastructure plan that is sustainable. That is the new goal of this government in order to have encompassing integration of investment geared towards sustainability, incorporating the SDGs of 2030. This is a challenge that we have ahead of us, and during the next semester we hope to see some results. results. This would be the first document where we would integrate the investment planning at the national level together with the achievement of the 2030 goals. We will continue making progress on our efforts with our PPPs to contribute toward to the 2030 goal. I know that there is a lot to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karin, for this final statement. Geraldo, how can public-private partnerships help with the achievement of SDGs in Parana State? 30 seconds to 1 minute, please.
Thank you once again, Stefan. I think we intend to add the highest number of partners possible to achieve the indicators that have been identified in our state for each municipality. And with that, we intend to really improve the quality of life, people's quality of life, services provided by the government to citizens, because the major objective of the overarching objective of ODS are people, in addition to planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. Via the partnerships, we'll meet people's needs. When people are prosperous and happy, the planet will be happy as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geraldo. And then, Francesca, what role can public-private partnerships play in the IDB's effort to promote sustainable development in all of Latin America and the Caribbean?
Thank you, Stefan.
América Latina y Caribe. As I said, the PPPs have the power to mobilize resources. This is an essential element, and our ambition regarding the SDGs is to have the mobilization of resources and strategic partnerships. In this case, I would like to highlight the importance of delivering information and transparency regarding information, because precisely these partnerships and the capacity of mobilizing resources is connected to achieving results and giving good reports regarding these results. Transparency and reliability of information is how we can contribute with the SDGs. And of course, the contribution of the PPPs here is important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Well, I think it became very clear that public-private partnerships can play a big role in implementing the SDGs. They leverage more finance, and if connected to the SDG approach, if I may call it like this, we can guarantee better planning and more transparency and better reporting. And these are all things that are important for the public-private partnerships, as we have heard here in this conference. So thank you very much for participating in this panel. Thank you for your interest. And thank you very much to the three panelists for the excellent contributions. Please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you.